Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about the best legendary lords for every single race in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. I've done a lot of ranking videos, but let's take a look at every single race. What are the best legendary lords, and also later on, which are the worst legendary lords for every single race in the game. I'm going to take it in order based on the selection screen for races in the game. And starting with the Beastmen, we have Taurox the Brass Bull. Taurox, of course, is the strongest legendary lord for the Beastmen. That's because of his faction effects. He gets a Rampage benefit and a Dread cost benefit to increasing Minotaur capacity. And Minotaurs are pretty solid units that you do want to use in a Beastman campaign, because they can do a lot of damage. They can also take a reasonable amount of damage as well, in particular the ones with shields, because they get a silver shield. It's kind of sad to see a Beastman unit having a silver shield when there are races with actual industrial capacity having bronze shields on their units. I'm looking at you, the Empire. But anyway, Taurox's main campaign benefit is through the Rampage panel. Basically, you start going on a Rampage and you start earning marks over here, Rampage marks. And you do have 3 tiers. Once you get to tier 2, of course, you get a reward for every single tier. But once you get to tier 2, you can then use the momentum of the Rampage in order to reset Taurox's movement. That means he can move across a vast area very, very quickly while he's in a rampage from tier 2 until tier 3. So you can fight a lot of battle, get a lot of marks of ruination, do a ritual, increase army capacity, get dread, get a bunch of faction-wide benefits. So Taurox has been described as a freight train ever since he was introduced in Warhammer 2. On top of that, he gets Juggernaut raiding stance, which increases his campaign movement range as well. And he gets Rivers of Blood in regions after winning battles. Stacks up 3 times, which decrease leadership for non-cast races, increase leadership for cast races, and increase cast corruption. Then he also gets a weapon strength benefit for Minotaur units and gets the Blood Beast effect, which is like an ability to basically do some damage in a fight. And then in terms of his special skill line, he gets Brass Body, he gets Juggernaut, Drenched in Blood, so Bestial Rage, and an additional stack of Rivers of Blood, Titans of the Deep Forest, so he's buffing Gorgons, Giants, Jabberslives, and Cygors. Then he gets Gore Feast, which gives him replenishment, and he also gets Gore Greed for Minotaur units, which replaces Blood Greed for his army. And then he also gets a cooldown ability for Blood Beast, Brass Body, and Rune Tortured Axes. Then he gets a choice between melee defense and ward save, or getting melee attack, terror, and melee attack for Minotaur units. I probably would say that bullish metal is probably the better choice because of that ward save. Though bear in mind that you may get a lot of ward save otherwise. But still, buffing melee defense for Minotaurs might just be the better decision, because they have plenty of melee attack regardless, but also getting terror for Taurox might be the way to go. He also gets the Rune Tortured Axes, which give him a lot of base weapon damage and armor piercing damage. Taurox is ridiculous because he's basically like every other Beastman Legendary Lord. He can just move faster across the campaign map. And he also gets these major benefits in terms of like sacking, raising settlements, horde building construction cost, various other things like Dread, Dark Moon benefits like momentum cost to replenish campaign movement range. That would be really damn substantial. Ward save for all units, getting the Blood Greed ability for his entire army, reducing enemy leadership. And at tier 3, you can get a huge benefit to reducing the dread cost for increasing hero capacity, or a further benefit to reducing the dread cost to Minotaur capacity. So yeah, great legendary lord, powerful melee fighter. Not the best duelist in the game, but certainly can get things done. For Bretonnia, it is Repanse the Lioness, the questing knight of Bretonnia. She's kind of a weird character. She should be a Grail Knight because she had the quest, she completed the quest, but she counts as a questing knight for whatever reason. Either way, she's the Jeanne of Arc of Bretonnia in Warhammer Fantasy. Now, what's the benefit in her campaign? Well, she starts with Kofir, which is a pretty good port that gives her a decent amount of income, casualty replenishment, crucially gives her Knights Errant recruitment ability, which is always great to have as Bretonnia, because it might be an issue in quite a few campaigns just being able to recruit the knightly units from the very start. Now, it would be great that if she started with farms as opposed to starting with the training field, because the infantry units of Bretonnia are practically worthless in a battle. You want to get archers, you don't want to, or bowmen, you don't want to get any of the infantry units available there. She does have a unit of questing knights and a unit of knights of realm, and she has a field trebuchet unit and foot squires, and she can also get more trebuchets by confederating the knights of Origo, which she will be able to do once she wipes out the Strigos Empire. Now, what's great about Repanse's campaign situation is she actually has an easier time of actually taking over all of Bretonnia eventually once she gets there, because she is not limited. She has a special skill line over here that doesn't limit her diplomacy options. Like, usually in Bretonnia campaigns, specifically Lewin and the Fey Enchantress, you can't confederate the other factions until you've done research over here. Repanse does not have that issue in her campaign. On top of that, she starts in one of the best starting positions in the game, very close to Archon the Black, and she can take over these two entire provinces very, very quickly and effectively in her campaign, ally the dwarves, so they'll help her out. Even minor dwarf factions are pretty useful allies to have in a campaign, because the dwarves on high difficulties tend to do very well, and she certainly can achieve that kind of alliance with the dwarves pretty quickly in her campaign. Another benefit in her campaign, just because of her starting position, is the way the vows work for Bretonnia. Usually, the problem that you encounter is the questing vow, because the questing vow requires you to deal with the siege battle, for instance, in a desert or jungle scenario. Well, guess what? You're in the desert, so Repanse can get access to vows much earlier than either Lewin or the Fey Enchantress. Furthermore, she gets a free control benefit in all provinces. That doesn't necessarily matter, because control isn't an issue for Bretonnia if they control an entire province. She gets a minus 50% upkeep for embedded heroes, which is good because heroes are certainly where Bretonnia is strong, and a melee defense benefit for questing knights. So questing knights, which are already good melee cavalry units, that and when they're standing in a fight, do get a pretty solid benefit. And she does lose minus 80 relations with the vampiric or the undead factions in general, though that's not going to hurt her at all because she wants to take over their entire territory. Special skill line wise, she gets a bunch of benefits for infantry units, casualty replenishment, benefits when fighting the undead factions as well, ward save, melee attack, construction costs, local recruitment capacity, corruption benefits, and frenzy for her entire army, so more melee benefits. So you never really want to use melee units as Bretonnia. Well, maybe battle pilgrims, to be clear. Sure. And she gets 5% physical resistance for all peasant units, chivalry leadership, and Halo of Maidenly Wrath. Now, this is a great ability because what it means is you can charge with Repanse an entire enemy army, and if they blob up, use this ability, she'll survive a lot of damage because she's lowering the melee attack of those units, and then use artillery to take them out. It's a very effective strategy. It may not work sometimes, but it is pretty damn effective when it does. And then she gets the Sword of Lyonesse, reduces spell resistance, so they're more vulnerable to magic. What I like to do with Repanse is just charge her in the middle of an enemy army, try and have them blob up against her. She'll survive very well against that damage, and then use spells and artillery to just take out everything there. It's one of the ways you can easily win this initial battle over here against the Strigos Empire. It can be difficult to pull off sometimes, however. For the Chaos Dwarves, we have Drazhoath the Ashen, the leader of the Black Fortress, or rather the commander of the Black Fortress and the commander of the Legion of Asgore. Drazhoath's main benefit, and his biggest downside at the same time, yes, it goes like that in his campaign, is that he starts with the Black Fortress. Now, you have a nuclear weapon in the prototype Mega Mortar over here, and you can use it in every nearby province. So if you're fighting Tretch, if you're fighting Emmerich, even with a minor garrison, you can inflict significant damage on them during the course of the battle. You have 2 uses for every single battle that you fight. So that is a lot of power. Furthermore, the Black Fortress is one of the main trade hubs, or not trade hubs, one of the main trade routes for Cathay and caravans. And you're far enough away from Cathay that they're very likely never going to attack you. It's very rare, and it's generally only going to be Xiao Ming that's going to move this far west, if he ever does. He has plenty of issues to deal with in Cathay. So you are in such a position that you can raid those Cathay and caravans, get a lot of labor, get a ridiculous sum of money, which you can then funnel into your empire. It's pretty good. On top of that, Drazhoath himself is kind of absurd as a legendary lord. You get an armament production benefit, an armament cost benefit. Then, in terms of his lord skill, he gets campaign move range, upkeep for Kadai, and Dark Renown ability, which affects units with contempt. Furthermore, he gets construction time, construction cost, Legion, so upkeep benefit for Infernal Guard, and armament cost reduction for Infernal Guard and Infernal Ironstorm. The Greed of Asgore, so income from cities and raw material output. Armament cost for Kadai. Ashen, which gives him barrier, giving him a lot of durability in battle. And he also has a really cheap casting ability for the Flames of Asgore. Let me explain how this works. So the Flames of Asgore, which are in the lore of Hashut, the Flames of Asgore generally cost 18. He's going to lower that by 6. Right? So he's going to lower that to 12. But the thing about the Flames of Asgore is that at rank 2, you're also going to reduce that by 3. So you add everything up together, right? So you reduce it to 15, then reduce it to 6. He gets really cheap Flames of Asgore. And I think Flames of Asgore is probably one of the best spells in the game right now in terms of pure damage ability. It is generally pretty expensive, of course, but by reducing it by 6, right, you're going to 9 cost for Flames of Asgore. That is ridiculously strong. Then he has a good item set that reduces enemy leadership, gives him melee attack for Infernal Castellans, which isn't too important, but the item set, that reduction of enemy leadership is pretty good. Ward save for his entire army, Demon Spike Crucible, Hell Shard Amulet, all really good stuff when together. It's a difficult campaign situation, but it's a great campaign all the same. It's one of the best campaigns in the game at the moment. So Drazhoath is the best of the Chaos Dwarves. Getting to the Demons of Chaos, and when I say demons, I'm not just talking about the undivided demons, I'm talking about all of them. It is N'Kari of Slaanesh. Now, N'Kari is in a complicated starting situation because Ulf 1 is very difficult to take down early on in a campaign. But if you manage to do that, if you overcome that early game challenge, and I gotta say, it is a lot of fun having to fight Tarion, Elfarion, and Alariel in a campaign from pretty much the very beginning of it. If you do manage to overcome those challenges, if you vassalize those factions, well, understand, Elfarion, Alariel, and Tarion are some of the strongest legendary lords in the game flat out, and they may become your vassals. It is a journey of suffering, but it is a journey that will give you significant rewards, and after you do it, you're just going to dominate the world, and no one's going to stop you. N'Kari is an absolute monster to face in battles because a lot of N'Kari's units, or all of them really, have devastating flanker, which means their charge bonus is going to be doubled when they do get a charge off. So they're just going to do a ridiculous level of damage to an enemy if they manage to get a charge on the flank. That isn't something to be ignored. Keep in mind that, because it means these units are just going to be pretty brutal when they're getting a charge off. Like looking at the Fiends of Slaanesh, so their charge bonus is double. That is a ridiculous level of charge bonus. Some of the best in the entire game that you can get. And with the Champions of Chaos, well, imagine going and recruiting. Imagine that you're going and recruiting Chaos Knights of Slaanesh that also have devastating flanker for themselves. You're looking at 120 charge bonus. I think that might genuinely be the absolute highest that you can get in the game. Or if there's any higher than that, I'm not quite sure which unit does have it. So you're really good in field battles, but you're crap in sieges. Though you can become good in sieges as well, because you can get Forsaken pretty quickly. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of downsides with demonic factions. The casualty replenishment is awful unless you're Nurgle or Scarbrand. The casualty replenishment can be pretty awful. The units themselves may be too expensive, etc. But N'Kari has one crucial thing in their campaign: scalability. N'Kari's economy can be pretty strong because of all the vassal income you can generate. And in general, N'Kari can actually build a pretty strong empire that generates a decent amount of income. It is decent, it's not great. It's decent income, but you can actually achieve quite a bit of economic output. It's not going to be the best in the world, but it is something that will keep your empire going. Furthermore, you can also summon a disciple army using cultists. And you can gain a lot of cultists by forcefully vassalizing factions or subjugating factions. You're gaining a substantial amount of cultists, and you're gaining a substantial amount of vassals in your campaign that will really help you out and do the fighting for you. Like looking at the Star situation, you'd want to take Tor Asher on turn 1 is a difficult battle, but once you do so, you just go over here to Elysia and you vassalize Crix, and guess what Crix is going to do? They're going to keep Be'lakor at bay, because yeah, Be'lakor is a nuisance, and then you do the same with Kotik. Over here, you take their settlement, or maybe you just sell all of this to Crix so that they're a better vassal. When it comes to vassals, it's usually better to have vassals that have more, it's better to have fewer vassals, but having them stronger, though of course you might get into an issue where they might secede. It can happen, though it is pretty rare. I've never really seen that happen, but I guess it depends on the way you play your campaign. So yeah, N'Kari has scalability in terms of their economy, scalability in terms of their armies, scalability in terms of just like their situation on the campaign map. Because cultist armies, like, they're much better than Bloodhosts from my personal perspective. Or rather, they're more defensive oriented. And it's easier to get a massive cultist army than it is to get a massive Bloodhost. Though individual Bloodhosts, some of them might be more powerful, but it's just like how many you can have. Because like Bloodhosts will disappear after a time if you don't engage them in battle. Disciple armies will not, as long as you keep them in an area with high Slaaneshi corruption. Then we get to the Dark Elves, where Morathi is number 1 for them, by far and away. She might not have the strongest early game. She doesn't have the dueling ability of Malice Darkblade. She doesn't have the sheer ability of printing money like Lokir Felhart has in his campaign. But what Morathi has is empire building ability. See, Morathi is like any other Dark Elven Legendary Lord, except she has Slaaneshi Corruption, which gives her a significant control benefit, which will help her out immensely in her campaign. Because having a good level of control as the Dark Elves is crucial, because you're going to suffer a lot in control because of the slaves you're getting. Furthermore, in her particular campaign, when we're just looking at her faction, the way there's a minor change in some buildings. Usually you would get Death Hags and Khainite Assassins from the same structure. That is not how it works for Morathi. She gets Death Hags from the House of Pleasure, which is a controlled building. And this building also gives you Slaaneshi Corruption and control. So you want this building. It will be very useful because you're going to get a lot of Death Hag capacity. Death Hags are great because of the replenishment they provide. Furthermore, you get a Slaaneshi Corruption benefit in every province, as well as just those Slaaneshi Corruption benefits in general. Morathi also is kind of ludicrous when we're looking at her lower skill line. She has the benefit of increasing Lord loyalty in her region, slave cost for sacrifice to Hecate, cooldown -5 turns for sacrifice of Hecate. Now, the sacrifice of Hecate, which is over here, isn't necessarily the best one, though it can be nice to get that Winds of Magic benefit and experience benefit. But when we're looking at her special skill line, the one you should probably go for is Tenacious. You'll get more casualties, more income post-battle, Rituals of Blood, so casualty replenishment, ward save, unit experience, diplomatic relations with Norsca and Beastmen. That's a bit weird, really. But not worthless. But crucially, you're getting absolute devotion. Now, this is ridiculous. You're getting a -50% attrition cost from all attrition. This means regardless of where you are on the campaign map, you're really not going to take a lot of attrition. You're going to have a Skaven Plague on her army, and you're barely going to take any casualties from her. And on top of that, you get the -30% upkeep for all units. It's not as good as some other benefits, but it means you have the ability of, you have a great deal of ability in Morathi's army to put whatever you want in that army and get the significant upkeep benefit. The alternative is Insidious, and I just don't think it's as good. Sure, there are some benefits, the leadership benefit, the benefits of Shades, but you generally don't want to use Shades. You want to use you want to use Blackheart Corsairs. Now, the 5% campaign movement range in itself is also pretty solid. I personally prefer Tenacious, though. The upkeep benefit is ridiculous. You can make a full Doom stack of Black Dragons all you want in Morathi's army, and you'll be able to afford it. Another major benefit in Morathi's campaign is her start position. She starts in the Titan Peaks, which is a great province. It has 4 regions. It has a significant amount of economic output. It has the wine ability, and it also has carved obsidian, and it has a pretty solid landmark. It was more absurd than Warhammer 2, but it's still a pretty good landmark to have. And on top of that, you have no major enemy to deal with in your campaign, because you start with a non-aggression pact with Mazdamundi, and he can become your best friend. All you really need to do is what the developers intended in this campaign. So you fight this minor Dark Elven faction, which only has 1 army, and by the time they recruit a second one, you'll just be steamrolling with a full stack. You take Iron Spike, and then you march over here to deal with the Skaven. And you sell this territory, this entire province, to Mazdamundi as you're taking it, as well as this province over here in the Iron Sand Desert. This will give you a military alliance with Mazdamundi. Then you come over here, you fight these guys or confederate them, you take the Sisters of Twilight, you sack their territory and take their tree and sell that to Katep. You're going to get a military alliance with Katep as well. The reason you want to sack the tree is because it's a lot of money that you can gain. And the feed trade for the Sisters isn't too bad either. Then you march over here, take back Clartaron, deal with Taurox, deal with Lifanar, Silostra if she's still alive. And while you're doing this, you're building a Black Ark army and getting it in Grey Rock Point. And then you're building a full stack on that, and maybe a full stack on land. And then you're just taking over Arnheim from the Bleak Coast Dark Elves, and then eventually marching with the full force to do a sneak attack on Lothorn. And thus you can conquer the entirety of Ulthuan very, very quickly, even without Morathi setting foot there. Because Tyrion, Alarion, and Alfarion are strong, but they're going to be delayed by Noctilus and Nakari. It's basically around 20-30 turns or so you have until they start losing, and they'll start losing very quickly once that happens. So you need to kind of rush it, but if you do rush it, there's an immense level of potential in this campaign in terms of taking Ulthuan. If you can take Ulthuan, it's like you're becoming the strongest faction in the game. And look at the situation. You're going to ally Mazdamundi. You can ally Katep as well. You ally Malekith. You ally Helebron. Or you wipe out Helebron. Maybe that's the thing. You take over this entire territory. You become so dominant, so powerful, no one is going to be able to stand in your path. That is what Morathi has to offer. That's all there is to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications. Stay tuned for more because there's more of these videos that are going to be coming. And I'm going to also talk about some of the worst legendary lords for every single race in the game.